It's 7th of October 25, and I think in the UK tonight there's going to be protests sympathising with Palestine, I think. And it's like 2 years after what happened 2 years ago, the thing. Yeah, and the right of Britain, the right parties like Tories, Reform, are saying it's disgraceful, they shouldn't be going ahead. And I think they want them banned actually. And that's ironic, and even Keir, well, you could say that is right anyway, but Keir's saying don't process. I think he's actually said a thing to them. Personally, I don't have any issue with them protesting. I've got total sympathy with Palestine, and um, it's not really to do about that, really, about an anniversary. It's to do with, we don't even know how many Palestinians have died since then. It's maybe 80,000 or something. But the the co- the corporation legacy media and our politicians don't seem to be that bothered, in comparison, you know. And I could talk more about that day as well, like how many were killed by whom, you know, because not just I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying, will we ever know? I don't know. Like, you know, so because there are a lot of the vehicles that came out of that festival, which was running. They were doing a day extra. I think I don't know how many days beforehand they decided to do a day extra or whatever, but and it was only like 5 miles from the Gazan border. I don't know how people feel about that morally. I don't think I'd be going to a festival that was 5 miles to how I would describe Gaza at the time. And of course, it was meant to be impenetrable. The Israeli side was totally impenetrable. It was a total Goliath, you know, times 10 or whatever. So, yeah, but it is ironic, just like on immigration, as I would say I'm with the advanced party in terms of parties, while the Overton window shifts, you know. So I'm definitely not left on immigration, you could say that. Um, so I feel it means that both sides are wanting me cancelled on two issues, So I mean, I would say Palestine is really the only one that the left can't talk about, really. Because you could say that Labour are the sort of ones that will let them talk. Okay, you can talk about this, I'm talking about corporate Labour, okay, you can talk about this. But you're not allowed to talk about that one thing, Palestine. And then they want people talking about saying immigration's a bad thing, or not it's a bad thing. They say they're sceptical or they're a bit anxious about it. You know, I mean, say the United Kingdom march. I think there's only been 4 or 5 of them, but everyone on the left was surprised at how many turned out for the last one, which is 500,000 or something. And then that wasn't getting advertised on corporate legacy media or anything, So the people going must have found out on social media, etc. And they actively went there as well on the day, They went from all corners of the nations, really. Yeah, so that's how strongly they felt about it, And now the left seem to have gone from calling everyone who attends that the R word. Now they're saying that not everyone was the R word, but some of them were, I think that's what the new Home Secretary said. So, because even Clive Lewis was saying that he saw some constituents there that he thought, well, they're not R word. Well, probably in the past, I don't know if he's called the whole march R or anything to do with Tommy and that R, but now he's seeing constituents that he doesn't regard as R. But what does that tell you then if they're going to the march? Either you think they are or they're not, or it doesn't really matter in a way. It's to do with um, the way the country's going. Are we going to be a utopia, or could it turn into anarchy? How are countries getting on around the world? Can we use them as a judge of of the, those countries? I don't know. Anyway, but also it's always felt like especially with the political parties, Labour and Conservatives. Not so much the Lib Dems. The SNP are very good in this actually on Palestine, and the Greens, especially under their new leader Zach Polanski, who is Jewish, and he's spot on it. So I'd say he's the best leader out of them by a long way. I mean, for my issue, I only vote on a single issue really, and on that really, it's well Ben Habib, but also the Reform are starting to seem to float in that way more as well. They seemed very timid on it at the start of Reform, but now they see the way things are flowing. I think um, the Overton window's shifted. I mean, personally, a lot of people are hard on Reform, saying they should be harder on immigration, that, but I can see where they're coming from, because it's not that long ago it was socially unacceptable. In fact, even a few months ago, even now, still to a degree, although it's getting thing. I mean, Keir Starmer said we're an island of strangers in May. That was a Labour leader, and I would say that's the best speech someone's made on this issue since 1968. When I say best, I mean the most common sense speech. But then a month later, he said he disowned the speech. So I don't know how speech writers feel about that. And I mean, I don't think anyone can trust him. I don't think even his own MPs trust him even. But Zach Polanski's spot on with Palestine anyway. So he's going to be an emperor's new clothes on this in terms of Labour and the Tories, plus Labour, Tories and Reform. I would add Reform to that as well, and corporate legacy media, who've all sort of kept, they've made it feel like we're a real pro-Israel country by 95%, and they're speaking for 95% of the people. And that gets me onto the new thing. I saw that on the 6th of October, yesterday, YouGov done a poll in the UK, and it turns out that 12% support Israel in the UK, or sympathise between them and Palestine. And before October 7th, 2023, it was 10% supported Israel. So, I mean, really, this is really what Labour and Conservatives are saying, and corporate legacy media, the message they're giving us is completely false, really, especially the right. It seems to me it's a completely false, and it is ironic. These are the ones that are saying that the government aren't listening to Labour on immigration. The government aren't listening. Labour aren't listening to the public on immigration, etc. I mean, immigration is about 57%. Say that's our most important issue at the moment, but here's Israel. I was thinking this might say 60% Israel or something, but it turns out 12%, and it was even lower before 2 years ago. It was at 10%. So it seems like a lot of people in Britain are seeing it correctly. I mean, there's three ways to see Israel, I think, in Britain. One is a sort of, I would say, British sense of fairness, considering we actually caused this problem in the first place, because in 1917 Arthur Balfour done that thing, and we won the area after World War One, and we in France made the borders. There wasn't borders before that. We made the borders. We made the countries. We had Palestine there. That was a country. It included Jordan at first, then split that in two to give it to another sheik or whatever, who probably was good to Britain or whatever. I don't know. But so you had Palestine then. That's no longer on the map. Yeah. So we literally caused it. And it is ironic and interesting as well. Arthur Balfour, because the first ever immigration law in Britain was the Aliens Act of 1905, and you can look that up to see about it. It was Arthur Balfour who was Prime Minister at the time, and why he done that. And then 12 years later, he was basically giving away land to someone else, or he said it was a land for two peoples, but mostly seemed to be emphasising over one people. And a lot of immigration happened after that, and then finally Britain handed it over to the United Nations after World War II. Then Israel got there, but through violence, and a lot of people were moved out of areas, including Ashdod. They were moved to Gaza, I think, for so I heard. But um, yeah, and also, and then when Israel said we're a new country, then America said they were recognising that country. 8 minutes later, it was like 8 o'clock on 1948. I don't know, May 1948. And 8 minutes later, the American president said we're recognising it. And then Keir Starmer just recognised Palestine like a month ago. Same with France, etc. So yeah. So I'm just going to look at this poll now just to show you. So looking at the poll, this was done yesterday, October the 6th, and it's just really interesting because I'm shocked. I thought Israel would be like 60% would be in favour, maybe 40% Palestine or whatever. But really, it turns out Israel's really low. So I'll take a look at this thing there. Yeah, it's hard to see, but Israel's a blue line. So before October 7th, 2 years ago, Israel was down at 10%. So July 23, they were down about 10%. Had sympathised. Which side in the Israel-Palestine conflict do you sympathise with more? 10% in the UK back in July, say June 23 or something, or whatever. And then it went up on October 7th to about 20%, so that's still very low. Since then it's drifted down, went up a bit, and at the moment it's down to 12%. And considering, I would say, really Britain's done everything it can to help Israel with what it's doing in Gaza and the West Bank. Well, almost everything, say 90% you could do for them. So, and that includes Keir Starmer. So I'll forever link Rishi Sunak to what's happened there as history unfolds, because I see pictures, I follow X, I see pictures of really dead children quite a lot from Gaza, As far as I know, on October 12th, the number of children who died, or babies, was 0, or 1 who was pre-born and still in her mother's womb, and I think she was one of the ones captive in a house with Hamas in one of the border towns, and I think the IDF tank blew the house up, basically. So apart from that, I don't think any babies that day on the Israeli side were victims, whereas I don't know how many. I see dead kids from Gaza all the time. I've seen about 8 this week or something, 8 or 9. But it doesn't seem to have an impact on British politics. From what I've seen so far. I mean, it might long term, but as I say, I don't believe in the electoral system. I think we should vote on issues, because we could vote this as a single issue as well. Israel-Palestine, we could vote it. Should we recognise Palestine? It shouldn't be down to Keir Starmer deciding. It should be down to the people. That could be a referendum, and then you're taking it out of the hands of the politicians as well. You don't need to have their party hamper, whatever that is. Their whole, because in the moment we have to vote for their whole views, basically, the whole package, which I call party hampers. So looking at who sympathised with the Palestinian side, I mean, it was pretty low. It was around about 23%. Then it went on October 7th, it went down to about 15, which is still quite high. But since then, it's when we up, and now it's at 38%. So it's still not a lot. It looks as if most Britons just don't know, because 32% have said most of the time they don't know, in the 30s. But Israel's really low. Palestine's always been a bit higher, and now it's very high, a lot higher. Both sides equally. Where I was around about 20%, now it's around about 17%. I mean, I think most people, most Brits, just don't know. And the ones that are pro-Palestinian, and I say you could break them up into three groups. You've got the one British sense of fairness, I think, which I include myself in that. It's not that I'm against anybody or anything. It's just a sense of fairness. And then you've got a group that I think it's ego-based. It's not really to do with Palestinians, I think. Um, it's more to do with how they feel about, um, how can I say, they're British, they've got British passports, and it's a chance for them to. Uh, I can't really go on about it. I hope you can guess from that. And then you've got the other lot, the Corbynista types, or the far left that seem to always be contradictory. Sometimes they're in the right, sometimes they're in the wrong. Cuba, Venezuela, even Russia. I think quite a lot of them support that sort of thing, which I think they're totally in the wrong. Maybe a clock always stops is always right twice a day. So on Palestine, I think they're in the right, but yeah. So on to the next bit. Yeah, here I'm just looking. Was the festival meant to be on October the 7th? Some have said it wasn't meant to be on that day. So I'm just saying. So it's saying here it was scheduled. It was originally meant to be a 2-day event starting on Friday, but some reports indicate it was originally scheduled for the Thursday and Friday, but the event was extended to include Saturday. This extension was reportedly added only a few days before the festival, so whether everyone knew that, I don't know, everyone who invaded or whatever, I don't know. I'm just looking here how many babies were killed in October 7 attack. They're saying at least 2 infants were killed. 10-month baby, old baby. That might be, I don't know actually, but I think because President Biden was saying, or former president was saying even a month ago, he saw pictures of babies beheaded, etc., or whatever. So there's 2 here. This one was delivered post mortem, a Bedouin woman. So I really don't know. I mean, I get my information from Electronic Intifada, who I believe to be, and Grey Zone, who I believe to be reliable on Israel-Palestine. I'm just talking about facts. I'm not talking about views. Although I think they're giving facts on it. So I don't know really. I need to look at it a lot more. So I'm just looking at the first real immigration policy in the UK in 1905. It was the Aliens Act. It was the first UK legislation to introduce general immigration controls in peacetime. Who was involved? Uh, the key groups were the British Brothers League, an anti-immigration pressure group that organised marches and petitions, campaigning heavily for restrictions. Williams Evans Gordon, MP for Stepney, a prominent Conservative politician who supported the League and was a leading advocate for the bill. His constituency in the East End of London was a major area of settlement for immigrants, and the Conservative government of Arthur Balfour, who 12 years later done the Balfour thing, the Balfour Declaration. And actually the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr Netanyahu, the street he resides in while Prime Minister is called Balfour Street, after Arthur Balfour. They introduced and passed the legislation. Opponents: Winston Churchill, future Prime Minister, then a Liberal politician, who strongly opposed the bill on the grounds of Britain's tradition of offering asylum, and some members of Parliament and community leaders. They lobbied against the harshest elements of the bill, successfully securing a compromise clause that technically made exceptions for those fleeing religious or political persecution, though the implementation of this clause was later debated. Lord Rothschild was one figure involved in this lobbying, and the target group, so it was this Eastern European, the primary group whose mass immigration served as a direct catalyst for the Act. They were fleeing persecution, famine, discriminatory laws, and that in the Russian Empire. Why was the Act passed? The primary driver for the Aliens Act was a reaction to the significant increase in this from the Russian Empire starting in the 1880s, which led to a growing anti-alien and political movement. Key reasons for the Act: response to increased immigration. Over 120 to 150,000 from Eastern Europe arrived in Britain between 1870 and 1914, most settling in the already poor East End of London. Although they were refugees fleeing persecution, proponents of the Act framed them as undesirable aliens. The Act was primarily aimed at controlling this influx, despite not explicitly naming them in the legislation. Economic and social concerns. Many native Britons blamed those for depressing wages, increasing unemployment and causing social problems in areas like the East End. The Act was designed to prevent the entry of those who appeared unable to support themselves or who were likely to become a charge upon the rates. Anti-alien sentiments, etc. Widespread prejudice was prominent in the public and political debates, with the poor people being falsely accused of bringing crime, disease, etc. Speakers for the British Brothers League argued that Britain should not become the dumping ground for some of Europe. Establishment of state control. The Act marked a fundamental shift in UK policy, moving away from the Victorian tradition of unrestricted entry. It established immigration controls and registration for the first time, giving the Home Secretary overall responsibility for immigration and nationality matters, and empowering immigration officers at ports to refuse entry to undesirable aliens, criminals, etc. So that's it really. I'm just talking about these two things. It is ironic, both by the way they're interconnected historically, just in Britain anyway, but also we're to blame for what happened to Palestine, and a lot of Palestinians come here. They don't seem to, when they're choosing the countries they want to live in, they don't seem to want. They seem to want to. Well, a lot seem to end up in the US and Britain, Canada. You could say countries that are supporting Israel do what they're doing, even over the last 7,500 years, and Britain created that. We don't know if these people, Palestinians, come and have considered other continents, or they've ruled them out themselves, if they've ruled out East Europe, what countries that they've ruled in, is it only a few countries? Is it only countries of the West? If so, why? Why are they considering them? Especially since we've been so bad to Palestine. You would say if it was a question of honour, then you wouldn't want to go. It's like going to somewhere that's been really bad to your country, basically. And then it is ironic on the other side. Like, the right say they're all for free speech, but they want these Palestine marches cancelled, even though, as I say, we caused it and that. And then on the other side, they want to talk about immigration, and the left want that all cancelled. So we get free speech being cancelled on both sides. And I want to talk about both of these things. And so, yeah, that was it really. That's all I wanted to talk about. As I say, I'm not talking about this country in any way. The country is happening to. I'm talking about my own sense of what I regard as my own sense of British fairness. It's nothing to do with not liking anyone or anything like that. So, okay, bye for now.